All right.
Well, good afternoon, Walter Meyer. I wanted to thank you very much, Myers, for joining me today on this interview. I have had the pleasure of meeting you a few weeks ago, and I wanted to ask you about not only your background, but the work that you are doing today and its relevancy, the importance of it. So perhaps you could just give a brief overview of your rather impressive biography of your life, and how that then moves us into today, and why you appear to be exactly in the proper place that you are today to lead this forward.
Well, if people want a thorough background, they can get it off of the Friends for Liberty United.com website. There is a picture of me there and a fairly thorough biography. But long story short, I spent a lot of time in management over the years and in planning. I was a test engineer during the Vietnam build-up, and my chore was to write plans and oversee their implementation for testing a lot of the equipment that went on Puff the Magic Dragon and the grenade launchers on the Hueys and different things. And from there, I ended up in Washington, D.C. as chief of a division for a project manager's office. And again, there was a lot of planning and the overseeing of them. From my final chore with and I did retire from civil service, my final position was chief of plans and programs for a general staff. And so I've had a fairly extensive background in planning and overseeing the implementation of them. So far as my activities with the Patriot Movement is concerned, I became concerned in the 1980s about where this country was and where it was going. And I did a 2.5-year sabbatical just to go back through history and find out what had happened to the country I thought I grew up in. When I got through, I joined a lot of organizations, such as the Gun Owners of America and the National Rifle Association, the Birch Society, the Committee to Restore the Constitution, and on and on. And every time I did, I asked for their plan to get us out of this mess we're in, only to find out that none of them had a plan. They are all primarily single issue organizations, and you will never solve this problem by any one organization will never solve this problem if they don't learn to unite in spirit and on some actions, while at the same time retaining their freedom to pursue their special interests. Will never ever get this country out of the problem it's in. So I encourage everyone to ask the leadership of those organizations that they're supporting, just where is your plan for getting us out of this? And if that plan does not include working with other organizations, then you better get out of them and find one that does. That said, go ahead.
I wanted to ask you, when you took that sabbatical, what is it that you saw? What was it that caused you to go, I need to study this in depth? And at that moment, then what was your springboard, and what was your
What I found basically is that this country is now being governed, not governed, but managed is a more appropriate term perhaps, in compliance with the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. And that we are in economic bondage, and there is no way for us to escape. And when I got through with that study and decided, well, that no one had a plan, I would write one, and I did. and I called a meeting for Constitution Day 1993 in Kansas City, Missouri. About 225 people showed up. Among them were Governor Meekum of Arizona, Senator Don Rogers of California, a retired Army colonel from the JAG Officers Corps by the name of Jake Basel out of Columbus, Ohio, Dr. Greg Dixon, who was the founder of the American Coalition of Unregistered Churches, Jim Thomas, who was the publisher of Media Bypass magazine. And so we had some fairly studious people, to say the least, well-informed people that were at the conference. And we went through the plan that I wrote, and it was decided that we would make one major change to it, and that was that Judge Basel felt very strongly about the need to include a lawsuit in the plan for getting the United States out of the United Nations. Because if America is to be made great again, and we would like for it to be, America is going to have to be in control of its own destiny. And if it is going to do that, there are three prerequisites. One, we must get out from under the commitment we have made to take joint and separate action to take care of other people's policies by way of the United Nations. Secondly, we have to get out from under the present system of debt creation that we call money. We have no money in this country. What we do and use as a medium of exchange are instruments of debt, Federal Reserve notes, if you will. And for people who don't understand our monetary policy, I again urge them to go to the Friends of LibertyUnited.com website, and you will find many articles on that site that describe what our monetary policy looks like. But the bottom line of that policy is, and I wrote subsequent to the meeting in Kansas City, I might add, I wrote this book, To Tame a Tyrant. And it is a three-part book, basically. One is that it describes what lawful government would look like if we had one. Secondly, how we were transformed from being a nation state or from being a republic into a nation state of global governance, if you will. And thirdly, how do you get out of this mess now that we find ourselves in it? And that's the important part and what we should probably spend our time on today. But needless to say, this is no longer the United States of America. We now live under a global system called a New World Order. I could probably read the definition of that New World Order for people. It might help them to realize.
That would be an excellent idea, because I think that we've heard that term for a long time in various places, but to actually recognize that we are living in this new world order, it's not something that's going to come upon us, but that we actually live in it today.
Yeah, we do live in it, and I really thought I could put my finger on it rather quickly in my book, but it turns out I can't. But let me just say this, that it starts out saying that the New World Order will be a world in which a supranational authority, that is to say, a group of people above all nations, will own and control everything. And the bottom line, the very last sentence, says that that supranational authority will have a worldwide police force to enforce the edicts of the New World Order. And the primary force of that international police force, the nucleus of it, is the United States military. I am a veteran. Those of us that served and are serving did not do so for the purpose for which we thought, that is to protect and defend the Constitution for the United States and the principles and procedures of our founding documents that gave us liberty, but rather to serve as mercenaries on behalf of this supranational authority to set up the New World Order. And we now have troops in over 170 countries, I think, and they're not there to give those people liberty and freedom, but rather to be sure that those countries are enslaved just as the people of this country have been and placed under economic bondage. And one of the things I wrote in that book that left unchallenged, that economic policy that we have, the monetary policy, can only result in the owners of the stock in the banks that comprise the central banks of the world, in our case, the Federal Reserve System, eventually holding title to all real wealth of their choice, a mortgage on the remainder, and a claim on all future production. You cannot stop it. That's the mathematics of the system. And what we see happening with the COVID virus issue is an awful lot of the wealth being transferred into the hands of the bankers at this time because businesses are being forced out. And I've read where as many as 50% of them that have been closed because of it will never reopen. That is real wealth that's being transferred. And it has to. We're slaves to that system. We are in economic bondage. And if we don't unite and regain control of what is truly a criminal syndicate that is running this country, then we will forever remain in bondage, and so will the rest of the world. For as America goes, so will the world go. So
you mentioned, I'm going to interrupt for a second. You mentioned with troops in 170 countries. Howard Zinn, the author of the history of the People's History of the United States, author, historian, lecturer, said that what we do to other countries in time will be done to the people here in the United States. And when I first heard him say that, when I first read that a couple of decades ago, I wondered how quickly that would actually turn back onto us. And here we are, as you say, we are enslaved. Let me ask you this, Walter. How long have you been aware of this undoing? Have you been following it your entire lifetime? Was it an epiphany? At what point? It was obviously when you took your sabbatical in the 80s, but obviously it had been something that you had been following for some time.
Well, I had. A friend of mine introduced me to the Spotlight magazine back in the 1970s. And that was a weekly newspaper that I subscribed to. And every week I would get a dose of how this country of ours was being destroyed. And that kind of perked my interest. And it was in the late 80s that I finally decided something has to be done. And that's when I took the sabbatical. I had a couple of mobile home parks and a farming operation, and I turned everything over to the wife and the two boys and said, you know, don't bug me any more than you have to, that I am just going to go back through history and find out what happened. And it's an interesting history, and I suggest everyone go through it. But once you do and you understand that we have a problem, you better start looking for a solution, because we don't have much time in which to take this country back and to restore the republic. And we've got to recognize truths for what they are, and we've got to work on those truths. And this problem, Kathleen, is a spiritual battle. It's all about good versus evil. And there are 5 things that I say that people need to understand and accept as being fact. the first one is that God rules the universe. He always has, he always will. The second one is that our problem, and this was agreed to by this group of people I mentioned earlier in Kansas City, is that we simply fail to recognize the importance of James 4:17, saying, "He that knoweth to do right and doeth it not, to him it is sin." Therein is America's problem. Too many people have failed to do what is right, and to the contrary, they have done what is wrong. And so we have created this mess we're in. Now, that mess was described by the 30 Republican governors in a document called the Williamsburg Resolve in 1944. And those governors unanimously agreed that federal action, I'm quoting, federal action has exceeded the clear bounds of its jurisdiction under the Constitution and thus violated rights guaranteed to people, close quote. They also gave us a goal in the form of a pledge they made, and again I quote, to restore to the states and the people the prerogatives and freedoms guaranteed them under the Constitution, close quote. The fifth thing that I say people need to agree to are the words of Midori Savatri, or at least acknowledge their importance. And Midori said this, and I'll try to quote it, but I may not get him exactly. But unless and until we lay aside our manifold private agendas and unite, we will merely be hapless observers standing at the bottom of a deep, dark pit, wistfully hoping to save the world, but doing little more than cushioning the fall of the patriots that are pushed on top of us. If people agree with those 5 things, they should begin to look for a way of working with other people on the really meaningful actions that have to be corrected in order for us to restore the republic. That is to say, what are the objectives that lie on the critical path to that goal? We in the Friends of Liberty United have identified quite a number of those objectives, and we are in the process of putting together objective pursuit teams for them. The plan I wrote also called for a legal initiative team and a legislative initiative team. Back in the 80s, we were quite successful in putting some of these together. The legislative team, we had legislators from 17 different states, and it was coordinated by Senator Rogers. Today, we're rebuilding all of that. Those folks that we started with back in the 90s have passed on. I might add that the plan itself calls for a national leadership team of a limited number of people. And the reason for that is we cannot afford to have it infiltrated and taken over by the enemy camp. And so to prevent that, I said we need a 5 or 7 man team at most at the national level. The mission of that team is twofold. One, they must provide the plan and the tools that are required to implement it. And secondly, they must work and function as a catalyst to reach out to the leaders of membership organizations and try to get them to affiliate so that this provides the manpower that you need, if you will, to put faces in spaces throughout the structure that has to be filled. And that structure includes you need a state leader in every coordinator, if you will, in every state. You need one for every county. And the most important part of the plan is the local chapters or teams, if you will. And we need one, at least one, in every zip code area. And the mission of that team is to provide liaisons with different segments of society, be it the educators or the clergy or the law enforcement people or the children, the youth groups, if you will, and on and on. But it's going to take a group of liaisons so that we can bypass the controlled media and get the truth told to people down at the local level, and to educate and then inspire them to do what's right to help solve this problem. Now, we only have today 4 boxes through which to gain control of that government. We are supposed to have 6, including the common law grand jury box that was authorized and is authorized by the Bill of Rights. If you had a common law grand jury and can issue indictments and presentments against anybody that you want, including politicians that have gone astray and done us in, you could hold them accountable through that process. However, it was declared in 1946 that through the federal rules of criminal procedure and a change to them, that common law grand juries are obsolete. They can't make them unconstitutional because they are included, like I say, in the Bill of Rights and authorized by it. But that's one of the many federal actions that have been taken that were unlawful. And in doing so, the court systems will no longer properly adjudicate the output of common law grand juries. So they're no longer viable.
How does that actually work? Maybe you could explain that.
Well, it works very well, I might add, that the juries, the courts are no longer using the Constitution as the basis for its decisions. There was a court case in 1938, if I'm not mistaken, it was Erie Railroad versus Tompkins, in which the court decided, the Supreme Court now, that the courts would no longer convene under the Constitution, but rather under the Uniform Commercial Code. Well, that's a whole big new ballgame. And the bottom line is that you can hold a common law grand jury. As a matter of fact, a group of us did in 1996 in Wichita, Kansas. And we issued presentments and indictments. And that's when we found out that the courts would not responsibly adjudicate them, but rather that the common law grand juries were obsolete. So now we're down to having 4 boxes with which to try to gain control of this rogue government, this criminal syndicate, if you will, that declared we the people, I might add, to be its official enemies on March the 9th of 1933. And so the federal government that we see is not the federal government that was created by the Constitution. Keep in mind that document was created by we the people, and we created states. The states in turn created the Constitution, and it is the states that hold the ultimate authority and the responsibility for the proper interpretation and implementation of that document, because it created the 3 branches of the federal government as an agent. And so under the law of agency, it is our states that hold the real power to control that federal government or do something with it. And we, the people, are going to have to be able to put enough pressure on them, and first of all, to educate them. The typical legislator doesn't even know the authority and the power that a state legislature has. So that's part of the the process that we have to go through. But to do that, we only have 4 boxes, like I say. One, we have the soapbox and the mailbox in all of their forms to try to educate and inspire people to do what is right, and that does include state legislators, and to responsibly use the ballot box to be sure that the representation we have is knowledgeable, is trustworthy, that they have to be courageous, and they have to have the integrity that is needed to do what's right. If we don't do that through the ballot box, then our only alternative is the cartridge box. And I fear that the day is growing closer and closer when we're going to end up there, simply because politicians, our elected officials, will not do what is right. And I can safely tell you, Kathleen, that every elected official I'm aware of is guilty of treason. Not so much by acts of commission as by acts of omission. Not a one of them have made any effort whatsoever to get us out from under the present monetary policy that is in compliance with the 5th plank of the Communist Manifesto. And therefore, they are adhering to the bankers who are enemies of our Constitution and having set up that policy in the first place. And that, by definition, is treason. You know, pure and simple. Those are the facts. And that's what I try to deal with all my life in engineering and the various positions I held. I had to deal with facts. I can't, you know, there's things I'd like to think, but I don't dare think because they're not substantiated with the facts. And so let's stick with them. So that's where we are. And if we're going to fix this problem, it's going to require a massive effort by an awful lot of people. Now, we have been very fortunate in the few weeks that we have been in existence. I say we, the Friends of Liberty United group, if you will, in attracting some very good people to its side, including you. We're proud to have people like you and be affiliated with you who are trying to do something constructive to help educate the people as to what our need is. But it's all going to boil down to the people themselves. Are they willing to face the reality and agree upon the 5 things I started with earlier and recognize the necessity of our working together as a team to take this country back? Or are we going to let it go by the wayside and become nothing more than a page in history? And as the America goes, so will go the world. And
I do believe that all the eyes are on the United States at this point, what we do, the direction that we take. So what in fact, so united, as we are united, we are strong. And of course, there's been a tremendous attempt to pull us apart, to close our religious worship, places of worship, never been done in history before. There's never been the global impact to devastate us economically on a global level. The twisting and the bait switching of what this pandemic is all about, the lies and the control of the mainstream media has been so thorough. So how do we, in fact, how do we unite? How do we join forces with you, with Friends of Liberty United? What is our action as individuals who are watching this today? How do we join our forces and become the strength that we need to take this republic back?
Well, a man by the name of Guillaume Pitt made a very important statement, and I'd like to be able to quote him, but I can't. But he basically said that unless and until, well, this is following Majority Saveteri's remarks, I might add, that we should never hold a conference or a conversation, but what it didn't help to create the army that we have got to have to take this country back. And the first thing you have to do is join the army. And people can join. Friends of Liberty United, $5 a month, I think, are the dues that has been set forward, or $50 for a year. But you have to join that army. And you then have to get active in helping to implement the plan that it has. And that plan, again, calls for a state coordinator in every state, a county coordinator in every county, but most importantly, it calls for the local chapters or teams down at the local level. And that certainly should be down to the zip code level at a very minimum. And that team of people have to be educated. And on that team, we need to have, in every county at least, a person who is intimately familiar with the activity that's going on that is constructive in this country. Now, there's thousands of organizations out there, as you probably well know. And out of those thousands of organizations, there's just a handful of them that are truly doing anything that is substantial. Fully informed jury group, for instance. We need jurors to be sure that they understand what has happened to this country, and that juries are deciding based upon the truth that they should know rather than what a judge leads them into doing. Certainly Rick Martin and the Constitutional Lawyers Group is an activity that is deserving of support. The people that are dealing with ballot access measures to be sure that we not only have the ability to put good people on the ballot so that they can be elected, but equally important to ensure that the votes are counted the way that they should be. And we, when I say we, Senator Rogers and I put together the bills to help with the ballot access problem back in the 1990s, mid-90s. So these things are available, but to get them through state legislatures is going to require an awful lot of political muscle. And that muscle has to come from we the people. We've got to unite and to recognize these activities that have to be supported and taken place. Now, let me say again, I joined a lot of organizations when I first discovered the problem that we have, only to find that they not only don't understand the problem, but they won't admit it. And I'm going to nail the gun organizations to the cross here at the moment. I urge everybody to dig up the United Nations International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And I think that you will find that the Second Amendment right that we are to have to keep and bear arms is conspicuous by its absence. We no longer have that right so far as I'm concerned, because I can't find it anywhere in the United Nations programs. I also urge people to look at State Department Publication 7277. That publication calls for the general and complete disarmament of the people of this country. Not only, well, yeah, certainly of this country. So take a look at these documents. That's where the facts come from. And then you have to learn to accept these facts instead of living in a dream world and continuing to support organizations that have no plan for doing anything constructive. There is one organization that claims to have 1 million followers to deal with the immigration problem. And yet its plan is to go to Congress on bended knee and beg them to do something about the immigration problem, when in reality, you know, Congress is our enemy. They declared themselves to be. Why do we want to go beg somebody that is our enemy to do something in our favor? It isn't going to happen, so it's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. People need to walk away from those organizations. You have to recognize that if your clergy won't tell you the truths about what is happening, you better find another church or stay at home and hold hands with your family members, because God said if 2 or more people are there, I'll be among them. Well, that's all you need. And we need the Lord's blessing. We've got to be sure that we're in consonance with it. And that brings me to a program I wrote called, I don't know, 10 steps or 12 steps to freedom. But the very first one is we need a national repentance. This is a spiritual battle. We need to get down on our knees and say, Lord, forgive us. Excuse me. Go ahead.
Well, I do agree with you that this is definitely a tremendous battle against life, against love, against our connecting with one another to our divine spiritual belief systems, and we are being attacked, and that seems to be at the forefront of all of this, from what I can see. That if you destroy our connection to our God, to nature, to life, to one another, then you can take hold and collapse humanity, and that certainly seems to be the very methodology that is being used to separate us from one another, to close the churches, to our places of worship, our capacity to see our elderly who are in nursing homes or hospitalized, or not being able to attend funerals or weddings, anything that we celebrate, not to be able to sing, not to be able to hug and kiss and hold hands. The whole orchestration of this is to tear us apart, to strip us of our humanity and our capacity to be able to share our compassion and our love with one another in an outward way, which is who we are. That's who we are as human beings. It's being torn from us, and our children are being shown that this is not something that they are being allowed. It's it's criminal in every single manner.
Oh, it is. And one of the objectives that we have on one of the objective pursuit teams is to purge America of the anti-Americans that we have here. These very people that have done this, again, they are criminals, and we have got to purge this country of them and get back to where we have good people. Now, talk about reaching out to others. There's a paper I have here, Kathleen, that is on the website, by the way, and it's disgusting and distasteful truths that I wrote. And I sent this to Black Lives Matter the other day. And I said, I support everybody's right to protest. And before it's all over, we're going to, in FOLU, do a lot of protesting, but it will be in a peaceful way, not with violence. We're not going to be out to destroy anything, and particularly people's livelihood, their businesses. But if you're going to protest, do it in a meaningful way. Say, here are the changes we want. And that's another paper that people will find on the FOLU website, is a declaration of demands. We need to demand and make known the changes that we want and that we're fighting for and will make as time goes on. This fight is just beginning.
And I think that's so important, that fighting against something is a futile process, but to create what we want and to put
That's right.
all of our energy and all of our creativity into that, then we can breathe life and love, and we can breathe a flourishing, and we can breathe a whole new existence into a way that embraces humanity rather than tears it apart.
And that's what we have to do, and we will do, and we can do.
Yes.
And I say will do. I really think that as people become aware of this Friends of Liberty United program, they will see the merit of what we're trying to do and recognize that it's going to take all of us holding hands together to do it. You know, you talk about embracing, we better not only embrace one another, we better embrace a plan, because a failure to plan is a plan to fail. Believe me, I spent my lifetime in planning of one kind or another. And if you don't know where you are today and where you want to get to tomorrow, and as you know, Friends of Liberty is holding conferences 2 and 3 times a week. They are a twofold purpose. One, and I want everybody to study the tool called Political Action Coordinating Conferences. It is a paper that you will find under tools on the FOLU website. But these conferences are designed to let everyone that's participating identify a particular issue that they have and the facts that are related to it and what they're trying to do about it and the kind of support they're seeking. And we need people who are capable of holding those conferences at every level of government. We're holding them at the national level, but they need to be held at state level. They need to be held down at the local level. People have problems there too that need to be addressed. And so the teams need to have a PAC specialist, if you will. The other part of our conference is called in-process review, where we look at where we were yesterday and are today and where we want to go tomorrow and what needs to be done. You know, this is the in process, and this will be a continuing process forevermore. And I'm going to be 88 years old in another month. I need to step aside and say, okay, you young guys, take this bull and ride it, because this old boy is about to get thrown off and out of here. So, you know, it's the younger generation needs to pick up where we are. But the plan is there, the processes are there for them. It's a matter of just picking up and turning the crank on them. And I hope that that younger people will recognize that and do that. Because in all due respect to you also, you're not exactly a kid anymore.
I'm not a spring chicken either.
Well,
true. You know, the thing that's very exciting, I had a number of people at my place this last weekend, and the young people that were here get this, and they're very awake. So we're talking, you know, late teens, early 20s. They see what is going on. They have not been, they haven't been put asleep by the media and by the psych op that that has been so carefully crafted to pull generations aside. So we do have that generation, most certainly. And I'm grateful for your wisdom and all that has preceded this moment in history that has given you this insight, you know, and giving you this knowledge of how to put a plan together. Because had you not had your career that prepared you for today, we would not be able to benefit from all of this knowledge, all of this wisdom, and the layout. I've looked at all these groups that you have carefully put together, and And it is a very fine strategy, and I can see that we can succeed. I think the other thing is that many people don't quite understand that this is a war. That because we don't have tanks on the streets, because we don't have people being machine gunned, we don't have planes bombing our cities, and we're so used to seeing that in movies. We don't so recognize that this war is a silent war of propaganda. It's a war of complacency. It's a war of eroding our freedoms. It's a war of putting us to sleep, and basically attempting to take our very creative process and freedoms and flushing them down the toilet. And many people don't see that. And we need people to wake up and recognize that it won't be long before we will have a system in place where we will not be able to make our own choices. We won't be able to live our lives as our parents did, as our grandparents, our ancestors. And we have to learn to unite and take action.
It's a war of ideologies, and it's really a war of godlyism versus humanism. Yes. That's the battle line. Christianity is not compatible with the New World Order. One or the other can survive, but not both. That's correct. We are either going to rally Christians and let them know these things, or this country again is going to become a page in history. And I don't think it's going to, because I think before that happens, there will be a civil war, and that people will finally recognize who the real enemies of this country are. And I hate to see that. It's unnecessary, but it's also inevitable, I think. John Kennedy said that, we're either going to get things straight or that's where we're going to end up. And we don't want to go there and don't need to, but we do need to unite to carry on this war on every front. Now, in all due respects to all the talking heads on television, the Hannitys and on down the line, Liberty with Levine and all of this, those people don't tell you the truths that I have just espoused this morning on this program. They can't. They're about fame and fortune. We're not. We're about results, facts, and the future. That's what we've got to deal with, and we can do it. Let's just get our act together and go for it. But you can't do it sitting on the sidelines. And you said that, you got a bunch of those young people with your place that understand that we've got a problem. Hey, understanding you have a problem isn't the solution to it. We've got all kinds of publications out there and all kinds of videos that are telling us every day what the problems are, but they don't tell you what the solution is. And that's what we have to do, is focus on what is meaningful and be sure that's where we're putting our time and our fortunes, whatever we can afford, into the fight and real uses. So I just encourage you, Kathleen, keep up the good work, young lady. You're doing great. And I really appreciate the opportunity to spend some time sharing thoughts and ideas and knowledge with you. But stay in there, hang in the fight, and go your best way. And don't forget who the real boss is. That, if we don't bow down once in a while and say, Lord, help us, it'll never happen. So, any more questions?
Thank you, Walt Myers. I really appreciate your focus, your direction, your understanding of what it requires, the action that's necessary, the war against humanity, against our spiritual world, and how well you have laid this out. This is about understanding the core problems, and it's about now taking action. I'll list the website below. I will put your email contact below. And people, please connect with Friends of Liberty United and join the website. Tell your friends, get involved, contact us, become involved on the weekly conference calls, and find out how to take forward, how to bring forward your gifts, because each one of us has a gift. Each one of us, that's the empowering part. And when we bring that into this effort, we will, in fact, hold on and reunite and bring our freedoms front row center once again.
Kathleen, I'd kind of like to close with one thought, and that is knowledge does not equal freedom. There's a lot of people who think it does, and they think they can study this problem out of existence. It's not the way it is. There was a man by the name of Grover Cleveland years ago that started an organization called Knowledge Equals Freedom. And I told him then, and I maintain it today, knowledge does not equal freedom. Knowledge without meaningful action equals frustration. And frustration brings apathy. And apathy brings on a sense of hopelessness. And that's where a lot of people are today. They don't see that there is a way of doing anything about this problem. Well, let me assure you there is. It's to grab your neighbor's hand and say, come on, we're going to be part of the team that's going to fix this problem, rather than sit around and moan and groan about it. And as far as your epidemic is concerned, it's a plandemic. This has been in the planning stage for years. And it's about two things. The other thing is you better study the United Nations policy on doing away with people, because there is a plan to reduce the population of the world significantly.
Yes, eugenics is definitely a core part of the plan.
Yeah.
And I think as well, when we become empowered and we recognize that, this is service. This is service to our children. This is service to our community. And if we can bring compassion and love in the process to this service, there is nothing greater that we can do to really bring about change through those actions. And if we cannot bring this forward for our children, for their futures, then we have failed our children, because we give them no legacy, and we have been the benefactors of our parents and their parents' legacies. And so it is our godly right to bring this forward successfully at this moment in history. And thank you for leading this.
We must do this on behalf of all mankind. It's not just the people of this country, it's the world.
Yes.
And I want to close with this thought. There is only two things that stand in the path of the criminals that are trying to enslave us all in their so-called New World Order. And that is the Constitution for the United States of America, the organic Constitution, Bill of Rights as well, and the people of this country. Those are the only two things. And if we, the people, don't have the common sense to use the tools that our founding fathers left us to straighten this mess out, then shame on us. And I don't want to be part of that group that gets shamed. So with that said, go back to work.
Yes, thank you. I'll see you next week.
All right. God bless. In the
Thank you.
meantime, take care.
You too. Wow, I think that was good.
Well, I thought so. I think it was a pretty good interview, and I just hope that it gets out there and goes viral, and that everybody in this country gets a chance to look at it. Because
Let's make it go viral. Do you have a photograph? There's one on the website, you said, I can just use that and I'll put that in there. Do you want to write something up specifically for me to post with this YouTube? Or do you want me to
Think
do
about
it?
that for just a moment. That other than to say that a failure to plan is truly a plan to fail, and that FOLU has the only viable plan that I'm aware of for regaining control of this criminal syndicate running the United States of America that calls itself a federal government.
Okay.
Can you use those words, or you want me to write something up and email it to you?
Yeah, maybe write it up. Just I want to make sure that you're comfortable with what is stated there, because this is going to go. I mean, people are going to see this, and I think that was a really, I don't know how many interviews you've been on, probably a lot, but people need to really, I think this was a good one. They need to hear.
Well, I have written a paper that's on the website under tools also. That is a guide for people that are going to do talk shows and beyond. And you have to zero in pretty much on the things that we covered today in this interview.
Yeah.
In all due respect to other people, and I know you did one with Clyde the other day, and he briefly managed FOLU towards the end of it, but his primarily emphasis was on going back through history and showing how he had found out all the things that de Tocqueville said when he came and visited this country. Those are interesting topics, but they're not getting down to the nuts and bolts of what we have to do.
Well, we're doing a series of interviews, so that was just the second of two. We're doing a whole series of them to lead up to this. So, but this today, I think, is really important because it's the action plan, and it's very clear what we have to do. It's a lot of work. And I know what it's like just to spearhead a local county level issue, and I know it can be done because we actually won. And when you get people really recognizing that they're up against what they're up against, then they have skin in the game, and then they really do participate. And
that's what it takes.
Yeah.
Commitment and meaningful action. That's the whole thing. There's so much action out there that is just wasted time and effort. And
yeah,
and
I have a whole county of people who will act based upon this interview. Land-based people, Christian people, who really, they're aligned.
One of the OPTs, which I did not mention, but which is very important to people in the Western states, is that we need a team that is dedicated to getting the lands that belong to the states returned to them. That is to say, BLM has no part in this. You look at the Constitution, it's very definitive on what land the federal government can control and purchase from the states. We need to put that back in force, just like we need to regain the ability to use our common law grand juries for the purpose they were given to us. And that is to be a fourth branch of government through which to control the criminals that purportedly represent us. There's so many things, and we need the legal team, we need the legislative team, we need to work with them very carefully. The first thing we've got to do, however, is to clearly identify just what are the objectives of these different teams. And I'm in the process of working with people now to try to get that done. I'm particularly concerned about the criminal justice system because we've got so many people that are in prison that should not be there.
Oh, it's horrific. Yeah.
Oh, it is. It's sad, and it makes me just want to cry when I see these things. Yuri Call has been in prison for 38 years and should never have been there in the first place. His family was ambushed there at Medina, North Dakota. And I went to Gordon's memorial down in Smithville, Arkansas, and saw the way in which they shot that house up. It just unbelievable, the number of bullet holes that were in that home. And Mrs. Call subsequently rode home with me. I was living in Kansas at the time on a farm, and Joan rode home from Smithville with me to Kansas and spent the night. And so we had a chance to chat, and she was there at the shootout, and she said she just got down on the floorboards and hit her head and prayed is about all she could do. But it was clear that the federales came there looking for a gunfight, and they found one, and a couple of them got killed in the process.
Yeah.
But it's just like Lavoy Finnegan up there in Oregon. Speaking of him, I've tried to reach out to Jeanette and get her involved with us because she's traveling the country quite a bit, along with a group called Center for Self-Governance, I believe it is, with Mark Kerr and that group. And they won't give us a time of day. And yet she could do a great deal to introducing people to this. And Center for Self-Governance, just by the very words that are there, you would think would be willing to jump on the opportunity to coordinate with other people. And yet they don't want anything to do with it.
Who is the person?
I think his name is Mark Herr that heads up that one. And then there's another one that is very similar name that should be willing to network with other people. But what we're going to have to do is invite these folks to come into our packs, let them tell us what their ultimate goal is. And then when they refuse to do that, we need to get the word out to people that, hey, this is an outfit that thinks that they're going to solve this problem all by themselves. It has never happened, and it's never going to happen. There is no organization that has been able to unilaterally do that, and thousands of them have tried over the years. It just won't work. Now, when we were active in the 90s and reaching out to people, Governor J. Bracken Lee of Utah had a group called the Committee of 50 States, and he agreed to coordinate with us. Larry Pratt agreed to, out of Gun Owners of America, which is a substantial organization. The most notable leader that we had was General Ray Davis, who was a former commandant of the U.S. Marine Corps. And Ray had an organization of veterans called About Face America. By the way, one of the major objective pursuit teams has to be to educate and energize veterans because they're a real key to our future. They've got the geographical dispersion that's needed. They have access to facilities. They have the respect of their communities by and large. So if they call a meeting, they can at least hopefully get people there. And they need to call them PACs for what they are. They're political action coordinating conferences, and give everybody a chance to shout about what the burr is under their blanket. But General Davis was, like I say, the former commandant of the Marine Corps, and he had access to the leaders of the various services, if you will. And we need that today. And that's why I asked about General Flynn the other day in the meeting.
Right.
I want to talk to General Flynn. I think that he is one who at least has name recognition. And if he had a group of people behind him, demanding that the leaders of the various services listen, he would probably have access to them. So, very important that we have a key retired senior military official. And I read a letter by General Flynn, which implied to me that he is very much of like thought with the rest of us. It's a matter of getting him involved. And it looks like we have a route to do that. And I've got to write up the summary of the meeting the other day, but Rick said that he has access to that lady that was Flynn's attorney.
Right.
I forget her name, but she's been very prominent and on the news lately and gets some airtime. But we've got to find a way of forcing people like Hannity and Levine and some of the other talking heads, if you will, to start telling people the truth. If you're not going to do it, and you're just going to be part of the problem, then get out of the way. We don't need that. We need people who are honest and sincere and that love this country. And for you guys to sit up there and do all this blabbing about nothing is not going to cut it. That's all there is to it.
Well, there's a lot of empty talking heads. I think I think it was Clyde who got the Constitutional Law Group connected with FOLU, and I got Clyde connected with the Constitutional Law Group. So it's really, and Peggy Hall has a big following, and she's involved with the Constitutional Law Group. She was on your call.
Who is that?
Peggy Hall from Orange County, California.
I don't remember her being on the call.
Oh, I thought maybe she wasn't. Maybe she was on the Constitutional Law Group call. That's right. She should be on your call. We need to get her on your call. And I'll talk to Clyde about that.
There's also another Hall, Chris Ann Hall or something like that.
And there's another, there's a fellow named Josh Del Sol. He has a big following. His work is primarily around wireless and 5G, but he's also very involved in the mask issue and all of this, since it's all interconnected. He has a very big following, and I've reached out to him. I want to get him on this call. I think it's really important. So
well, we're going to meet Monday again at 1 o'clock Eastern. So if you know people that should be added to the agenda, let me know, and I will put them on.
Okay.
I'm going to have to start getting a little meaner, if you could use the term, with people, or a little more firm.
I thought it was really good what you did on this last meeting. I think people aren't focused enough. So we've got
to keep them on point. And
yeah, no, I think that
we put the invitations out. I put them out with the thought we want people to write up what they see to be a problem, what their goal is, eventual goal. I mean, the end result of what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And what the facts are that bear on it, and the discussion of them, and their conclusions, recommendations, the action they're taking, and the support they're seeking.
Yeah.
If people will write up a paper in advance, they might have to think 3 hours to get that paper put together. Believe me, it's not easy some days to do that.
I know.
But you can narrow it down into a 5-minute presentation.
Yeah.
And when I conducted these conferences in Kansas years ago, we had 13 different organizations, and these are diverse organizations. Some of them were agricultural related, Cattlemen's Association, wheat growers, and different ones. And then we had Eagle Forum and Daughters of the American Revolution, diverse groups of people. But there were 13 of them, and I couldn't go to a conference and let everybody get up there and blab the way some of these people want to do. They just like to hear themselves talk.
Well, that's true. Again, I support you on that. And people need to understand. I don't think people understand the severity of this. I just don't think they're grasping it. I think that's part of the problem, because we have been living in a very, fantasy land, disconnected from why we have arrived at where we are today. So the more you call us to order, I think the more we will understand it. So
well, I'm always walking a tightrope in doing these things. It's kind of like being a ringmaster in a circus and trying to keep all of the activity that's going on around the ring
it's
in
like
the proper order and doing the right thing at the right time. And I don't dare alienate people by being too mean. Right. On the other hand, I can't let them just run loose, because you get somebody like this lady that was with Rick the other day, whatever her name is. She likes to hear herself talk. Yeah. And she wants to talk about what they're doing on a particular issue in a particular town somewhere, or with somebody on a particular lawsuit. That's all important. Keep up the good work. Go back to work and get with it. But don't waste our time in these conferences for that, because that's not the purpose of what we're trying to do.
I think if you, maybe you've already done this, but if you could just make a couple bullet points about how much time each person has, and what you want them to focus on, and nothing more.
I tell them in the beginning that, we want these presentations made in 5 minutes or less.
Okay.
That forces people to think through what it is they're going to say. But they get on there, and instead of sticking to the script and doing it in 5 minutes or less, they want to be heard.
I know.
And everybody does, Kathleen. Don't get me wrong.
I'm guilty. I chair a group in Santa Fe, and I'll tell you, it's like herding cats.
Yeah, right through a fish market.
That's exactly correct.
You got it. I haven't been there done. Over the years, when I was in Washington, D.C. as chief of a division in the project manager's office, it was easy for me to get a lot of things done because I had 4-star general authority.
Oh.
And, I could say, hey, let's knock it off. This is the way I want it. This is the way it's going to be. I will send you a message on it. Case closed. Well, I can't do that today with what we're trying to do.
No.
It would piss people off till we'd lose them. And Lord only knows it's hard enough to try to get people to work together without alienating them with some sharp words. But I'd sure like to. But then I had, like I say, I had $100 million budget, and I had 4-star general authority, and I could get things done.
It was hierarchical. This is not. Yeah. This is bottom up. This is right. Everybody is equal here. So
it's a game we have to play, and I don't know. There are days when I can see, Kathleen, why there has never been a movement come together in this country, because it's just too time consuming and difficult to do. Even though I've got the plan, that it's laid out in the book. It's not hard for people to read and the script to follow. And it's even on the website.
I know. Walt, it's going to happen. We had success in our county. I can see how it works. I've been a part of a small effort where we took it to culmination, where we passed our own law. We went up against state, we went up against federal, we went up against corporations. It's possible. I know it.
Absolutely.
As you know. I want to, before we go, I want to make one request. I wondered if you could put on your site a place to post quotes and a place to quote writings and poetry. I'm a poet and I'm a writer, and I would like to post some things that I've written. for people to read?
Why don't we just make a page, Kathleen's Corner? You know, I've got a veterans corner, and
Well, I would welcome any writer, any poet.
well, okay, it's not Kathleen's corner then. We would have to find a different term to use.
How about writers,
you know, poetry personified or something like that.
I love it. Okay, I love it. Poetry personified. That sounds great.
You know, you're putting it can be any person that's
Yes.
writing and
Yes.
is there, so it's kind of poetry personified. Yeah, I'll tell Larry to put a page of that nature on, or let me bring it up in the pack, and
Yeah, that sounds good.
let other people consider it also. I've got to, you know, again, if you're going to build a team, you've got to consider everybody all the time.
Yes.
And while I'm very dogmatic, don't get me wrong, and I'm not afraid to make decisions.
I know.
Right or wrong, I'll make them. And I've been wrong on a lot of them. But the fact is that there comes a time when you have to. You know, I wish they'd give me control of controlling our borders. I'd fix that problem in 2 weeks.
I know, you told me about that.
Well, it's not a difficult issue if you accept that you're at war and that there are casualties in wars, and there's going to be a few casualties to put a stop to the nonsense down there.
Right.
But it can be done, and it can be done quickly.
Right.
I would love to sit down with Trump for an hour.
I'd love for you to sit down with Trump. Well, Walter,
I took him. I'm a little upset with him, to be honest with you.
I think a lot of us
voted
are.
for him. I sent him money. I keep getting requests every day to send more money, and I have quit because he hasn't done what has to be done. And it's not that he doesn't know it. When he was in Vegas on the campaign trail, this is before he was elected, I took him a copy of my book, and I took him a letter. And I said,
you told me that.
Okay. And he has ignored those 3 things that have to be done. And so I will probably vote for him again simply because I think that he's the better of 2 evils. And I still hold out some hope for him. He holds up the Bible, and I'm hoping one day that God will strike that Bible with it in his hand and put some common sense in him and some courage, because that's what it's going to take. If I were in his shoes, I would call the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and all of the chiefs in, and I would tell them, guys, I'm going to need your protection to no end.
Oh, yeah. No,
because I'm going to go tell the world what has happened. As a matter of fact, I've written a paper, Kathleen.
Walt, I have to go because Clyde's trying to reach me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and we were supposed to have a conference sometime today, so I know he's.
Go for it. Have a great day. Thank you. Good interview.
Thank you. And send me that as soon as you can, and I'll send you a link.
Okay, and send me a link to the interview. I'd like to see how it went. And,
as soon as you get that written up.
What you're looking for is just a few words to go with it that, here it is, folks, you better pay attention to what's said in it.
Yes, if you want to come up with a title, otherwise I'll come up with a title, but a little brief description of it, 4, 5, 6 sentences, whatever you want to write, and then I'll put all that on and I'll send you a link, and then we'll go viral.
You take a shot and I'll take a shot, and between the 2 of us, maybe we'll hit something. Okay?
Thank you so much.
All right. See you. God bless.
God bless. Bye-bye.